Hello, Ryan from Prop.Gamer here. I want to preface this by saying that this video will contain spoilers for the entire Xenoblade series, including X, and the entire Xenosaga trilogy. You have been warned. Okay, so with that out of the way, I have a pretty crackpot theory for Xenoblade X, but first I want to bring up some concepts from across the series, since Takahashi is known for reintegrating older concepts and frameworks in his newer stories. Aidos is the governing body that employs Galea, Klaus, et al. With their work on the conduit. The Trinity processor cores were individually raised in a virtual reality environment in order to develop personalities that would be able to wield the power that they control. This information isn't specifically from a game, but instead the lore card that was given with the Japanese exclusive Siren model kit. Aidos is opposed by the Saviorite rebels, a faction that mirrors the Xenosaga Salvatore faction. Salvatore and Saviorite both have etymology in child of the Savior, as they are comprised of two groups of people: designer children and URTVs, or Udu Retrovirus. Designer children came first. They were children that were sold off by their consenting parents to military genetic modification for use in experiments involving the UMN, or the Ernest Mundus Network. The UMN is the internet structure that was created by Vector Industries, specifically by Wilhelm, using humanity's collective unconscious as a foundation. This means it is creating a virtual reality that is being powered by Udu in the higher imaginary domain. This is what allows faster-than-light travel and recreations of memory or spaces that used to exist in Xenosaga's Encephalon. Many people were made into designer children and were killed during phase transfer experiments led by Vector to oppose the religious sect of Ormus, which originated on Lost Jerusalem, aka Earth. But this is basically just a shell game, as Wilhelm is also the leader of Ormus, so he's constructed a paper tiger for the designer children to fight after. His real goal is the construction of the UMN. Dmitry Yuriev is one of the few designer children who has survived his experiments, and due to this, he's gained otherworldly abilities, such as being able to transfer his consciousness to other bodies to survive like a parasite. As he grew up, he founded the Salvatore faction and ruled it from the shadows alongside the other designer children who had made it to adulthood, notably including Eric Weber, aka Voyager, the man who would eventually become the Black Testament under Wilhelm. From here, Yuriev would create his own form of designer children in the URTVs, being genetic clones of Yuriev, each specifically intended to counteract Udu's waves from the higher imaginary realm. In Xenoblade 3, Future Redeemed, we know Dmitry Yuriev's active in Earth's political scene, fighting for the rights of designer children, or whatever Xenoblade will end up calling them, as we're apt to new localization in this case, as Dmitry to Dmitry, and the Salvatore to Saviorite. As this is going on, Klaus shenanigans both ensue and are resolved at the end of Xenoblades 1, 2, and 3. Earth is back to one unified existence, and the post-credit scene with the blue light falling toward Earth is heavily reminiscent and mirrors Xenosaga 3's post-credit scene, with Cosmos' remains floating toward Lost Jerusalem. Of note, we have word from Takahashi from the Xenoblade 3 art book that talks about Logos' core crystal inside End's Sword of the End. And he mentions that, for the time being, Malos is dead. As for what his core crystal is doing in the Sword of the End, I can't reveal that yet, but what N is holding there is Malos himself. Since Numa's core crystal and Matthew's gauntlets of the End, which became the sheath for Noah's Sword of the End, and Noah returned their data back to Origin's banks, him throwing the sword to the ocean frees it up in Origin's memory, means that once Earth is able to reunite, Numa would have the means to reconstitute from her core crystal, as she would be no longer needed to power the world. The Trinity processor was only needed inside the simulated world of Ionios, a world that was upheld by Origin and Mobius, the noted collective unconscious. This would also mean that Shulk, Rex, and A would be able to be free from their space as well, as they would also not be needed to uphold the world. However, Malos is different. He's dead for the time being. Now, all of this is interesting, but none of it touches on X. Yet. So, my theory is that Mira and the world of Xenoblade X as we know it is a simulation. This is not a unique theory, but I have some unique thoughts that have to add to this collective pile. There are always weird things that clashed with X specifically that kept it from being cleanly in the same universe as either Xenosaga Gears, or Xenoblade. In X's opening cutscene, we see two alien factions fighting over Earth, and it's clearly shown that the ships of one of the alien factions, the Ghosts, are being shot down, and their ships are exploding over Earth's surface with their antimatter engines. Part of the theorizing that people, me included, have done to cope with this up to this point is that the destruction of Earth didn't happen exactly as the opening shows it and we're being lied to, that it secretly could have been separated by Klaus when the White Whale leaves the planet, but it is a bit messy to assume that we're being lied to with no evidence, so it's easiest to assume that Earth is being destroyed as we're being told. 2. X features many different alien species which never feature in any other Xeno property. This could be a retcon if they wanted to, but again, it's messy to assume that'll happen without evidence. 3. These alien species can all speak the same language, a point that is brought up during the time of X's runtime. They're each speaking their own native tongues, but something is universally translating it into a common language. It's generally hand-waved away as something about this planet, similar to how the endgame revelation at X, where the life world is actually destroyed, and nobody knows why the Mimiosomes are still working, still alive. This too is generally hand-waved away as something about this planet, and then boom, end of story. I've theorized previously that after fucking off in Xenoblade 2, the Conduit arrived in Mira, and was thus responsible for all the weird shit happening there. This is nice, but it's, again, just a bit messy to wonder why of all places the Conduit would just so happen to end up in the exact universe where X takes place, in the exact spot where Mira is. So, with that, I believe Mira is being run by the Conduit, but much more in the same way that the Conduit ran the virtual spaces that the Trinity processors developed their personalities in, much like the UMN having virtual spaces that, for all intents and purposes, are not much different than reality itself, as it's powered by the collective unconscious or imaginary domain. Another point is that the fact that the Ghosts have featured in the newest X trailer, and a clip from the website shows them chlorinating some Blade members in a scene which nearly one-to-one parallels the Woglinde's Realians trying to shoot Gnosis before being turned to salt. The same thing happens to these Blade members here. Gnosis are ghost aliens from Xenosaga, who are the souls of people who reject joining the collective unconscious. They are the souls who have had strong willpower, who believe they were unjustly killed. They have the determination to keep on fighting despite the odds. They are the protagonists of their own story. However, the reality of the situation is they are dead, and they are now wreaking havoc on the living for their refusal to die. Them, as beings from the imaginary domain, cause matter in the real domain to chlorinate when they make contact, and as such require a phenomenon called the Hilbert effect to drag the Gnosis' full forms to the lower domain so they may be killed and thus better reacclimate to the collective unconscious. Now, this is first seen in the Blade series with the Fog Beasts, as the worlds of Allrest and Bionis acted in a way that resembled this relationship with the Fog Beasts, but neither Allrest nor Bionis are truly the imaginary domain. No one is above or below the other, they are parallel. So while it is close to the same thing, the source is itself not coming from Udu, or whatever Udu will be called in this new localization. Shulk does, however, create this world's version of the Hilbert effect with his new Monado, so that's cool. The Ghosts in X, however, are aliens who seem to act exactly as the Gnosis in Xenosaga did. They are quite literally aliens called Ghosts, who, for reasons unknown, fully have chosen to have their fight with the other alien faction, being the Ganglion, the main threat of the X's plot, who are after Earth for their own reasons, over Earth. They spawn from these reverse annihilation events, leaving void space that sucks in all light, as opposed to annihilation events from Xenoblade 3, which create light as the two parallel matters touch. Of note, annihilation events are pneuma-colored light streaks, as it removes the land masses affected from the Ionios simulation. Since as of this current time there is no conjoined Earth, there is nowhere for that land to go, so it is just removed. However, pieces of Mira are being removed because of these reverse annihilation events, which are notably Malos-colored, and they seem to be depositing it into this new continent or new space that we see them exploring in this new trailer footage. So there is somewhere that is receiving or generating the land being taken. Then we have the Black Knight. I won't get into plot details with him because there really isn't much, since he was originally cut or left for the cliffhanger post-credit scene. but he was Elma's original partner who piloted the Ares tandem scale together to try to fight off the aliens fighting on Earth, which Teehee resembles the real-world Ouroboros design and even has been redesigned to include Mobius symbology. And Teehee, also Elma has dialogue in the new trailer which implies a connection between the Ares and the ghosts. His face has been purposefully hidden ever since his original appearance, and even now in this latest trailer they are still purposefully hiding his face, meaning it is important to us, the fans, because there would not need to be a reason to hide it for this long and be this purposefully vague if it was someone that we wouldn't recognize. If it was someone that we wouldn't know, but the characters might be surprised, we would have seen his face by now. His hair is gray and he seems to have a similar skin tone to Elma, who herself is an interesting design as she takes elements from Chaos, Telos, and Alvis. It is my theory, finally, that the universe of X is a simulation meant to develop a personality or redevelop a personality for Malos. I think the Black Knight will end up being Malos, and the purpose of the simulation is to redevelop his personality after his death in Xenoblade 2. Or it could be the original VR space he grew up in, considering this game released originally before Xenoblade 2. I'm not sure if I believe that this was the original plan for the Black Knight. I think they've had the chance to change their direction with having context from Xenoblades 2 and 3 and Future Connected, Future Redeemed, and Torn of the Golden Country. So I'm not going to sit here and say this was the whole 4D chess plan the whole time, but I think it's what they're doing now. And also, I think it's more fun this way, given Takahashi's teasing of Malice's eventual return, that this is to redevelop him and reintegrate him into someone who more aligns with his original non-tainted values. This would solve the contradictions of Earth's destruction, and why Future Redeemed would have information that ties to X but doesn't 100% match up. Project Exodus and the ship Icarus would be real things in the real world, but in the simulation it's the White Whale and other unnamed ships that make it off of Earth. And of course, in the real world, it's Klaus's experiment that goes off, which desecrates Earth, whereas in the simulation, it's being assaulted by the aliens. In this theory, the simulation would be powered by the conduit, and the virtual space would be connected to the imaginary domain, being upheld by the collective unconscious. As Dmitry Yuryev being a thing sort of implies that Udo is also a thing. You tend to have one with the other. Otherwise, there's no reason to have the design of children, unless you create something entirely new, in which case there's no point in theorizing, because we have no clue. And the collective unconscious now would contain souls that refuse to be absorbed into the collective, souls that want to live very Mobius-esque will against our heroes. They would bleed into the simulation and appear as the ghosts, bringing with them dark matter and would cause corruptions to the data. And we are now seeing the result of that play out in this new epilogue story. Some might say they would hate it to be a simulation because it would cheapen or lessen the events of the story if they aren't real. However, I disagree and I have some points to counter this argument. We have seen beings raised in artificial spaces that are no less real. Hell, we love the Trinity processors, and they are this to a T. Cosmos' whole arc is her coming into her own as an artificial being, even as she is housing the spirit of Magdalene. But this would lead us to believe that characters within the simulation could be extracted from the simulation and placed in biological bodies, and that's exactly what happens with Alvis, Pyra, Mithra, Malos, etc. And this would lead them to be able to tie into whatever comes next for the story of Earth post-Future Redeemed. This is also possible that some characters may not want to leave the Mira simulation, which would open up story paths for the future of Mira itself. But if, say, Elma were to be called on to Earth, New Earth, in her true identity, true form, that would be open for that kind of crossover. I also think it's an interesting idea if the Mira simulation was started before the class experiment began, and is still actively running during the time of the numbered trilogy being suspended in the imaginary realm. And I guess the last thought I have is, since the end of Xenoblade 3, when Earth is reunited, that would imply that Dmitry Yuryev is once again back at his bullshit. Given the fact that he's a body hopper, which beloved character do you think that we're going to have to kill as he takes them over? Kind of like Guinan. My thought is it would be fun if it was Pyra/Mithra, because we've had a villainous Logos in Malos Xenoblade 2, we've had a villainous Ontos in Future Redeemed, but we've not had a villainous Numa. Unless you kind of want to count the shit sheet Mithra did in Torna the Golden Country. I don't consider that villainous, though. I consider that a mistake. She regrets that. She considers that a mistake versus someone who is choosing to do the things that which they are putting into effect. And I mean, I guess that goes against body hopping, but to see a villainous Numa, at least in Vision, then that'd be cool. That'd also be heartbreaking, but that'd be cool. Alright, that's about it for this theory. I know most of it is kind of the general consensus for this theory, but I wanted to tack on my own thoughts for it being a VR development space, similar to how it previously was for the other Aegis core crystals. And yeah, I'd love to see Malos again. I think it's interesting that we are getting the Xenoblade 2 hairstyles for Malos and Pyra/Mithra and Nia. I think that is nice, and I also think it's interesting. So I'm going to have my eye on that. So yeah, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them down in the comments below. If you have anything you want to add onto the theory or challenge, I'd love to talk more about it. Check you guys next time.